this happened to them much later. In his 50s and 60s, Paul has been, and Yoko, are acquiring things behind the scenes. A lot of the stuff that's sold at Sotheby's. But in these days, there's no interest. So these particular bits that I picked up and kept them safely. While I was doing the book, I stupidly never used a tape recorder. I had tried a tape recorder on the Sunday Times once. I'd gone to see W.H. Auden, which would have been my first mega interview. And I went to see him at Stephen Spender's house. I was told by the literary editor, Leonard Russell, to give this envelope to Auden. And I thought, well, I better take a tape recorder. And I got a Grundig. It was the size of this room, absolutely enormous. And I was so obsessed by it, I couldn't really get it to work. I actually looked in the taxi at what was in this envelope, and it was 30 brand new pound notes. And the minute I gave it to Auden, he had no interest in me, no interest in answering the question. He got his money. God knows what the money was for. So I was obsessed by this stupid Grundig thing, and he wasn't interested, and the interview never appeared. So I never used a tape recorder. So if only I'd used a tape recorder when I was interviewing the Beatles for those 18 months, wouldn't that have been a marvellous? Some people later, such as Barry Miles with Paul, did it on tape recorder, didn't you, Barry? Yeah. I wish I'd done it. What I did do, when I was in the bowels of when they were making their music, or when I went to the Sergeant Pepper photograph session, the famous Peter Blake one, I wouldn't write notes then. I would sort of just be hanging around. By the way, I took one of the objects in that famous Sergeant Pepper photograph. It's a sort of funny obelisk. I was in Paul's house and we're getting ready to go, and he said, we've got the flowers in the front, the crocuses, spelling Beatles. Well, let's put some objects in. Look around the room. So I just took it from his mantelpiece, and I got to the Flood Street, was it? I got to where the photograph was taking place, and I put it down, and it stayed there, and you can see where I put it. Anyway, at that session, I didn't write notes, but it was amazing because in the corner was a statue of, not a statue, a cutout of Hitler. They were going to have Hitler in the lineup of all the famous gurus and the famous people. And at the last minute, John had been talked out of it. Look at the trouble he had with Jesus. And when I came home that evening, when I came home from it, listening to the music being, I would write my notes up immediately, which was still in my head. And I've got those pages of saying, and Hitler was watching us describe what it was. When I was at the houses, individual houses, doing one-to-one interviews, I would get my little notebook out and I would write down the memories of school and the answers and the first impressions. And so I've got 40 little red notebooks, and I can't read a bleeding word by writing so appalling. But the other day I was looking up something, and I found out when I was interviewing Paul, I was asking him the famous meeting with John at Woolton Parish Church when the Quarrymen are playing, and Paul is brought around by a mutual friend.